So the greatest sin, we killed the Son of God. There's no greater sin than that. Where sin abounds, grace abounds the more. And see, all of that was made possible in a way by the great sacrifice of the cross, which is why it's a saving act.
Well, that's, I'm striving to understand. No, okay, so I want to ask you a bunch of questions. Why does, okay, so let's say Christ maintains his, I know this isn't exactly the right way of thinking about it, but it'll work for rhetorical purposes, I think. It's, so Christ is tortured by betrayal, by physically and spiritually as well, because the best way to torment someone is to punish them despite their innocence, right?
Yeah,
so, right. Or maybe worse than that, to punish them because of their virtues. That's even better. And so that's intrinsic in the story as well. Christ bears up under that. He doesn't repudiate God, or doesn't repudiate his own essence. It's something like that. Then what is the example of that? Is the example of bearing up under that exceptional duress and maintaining a moral stance? Is that the example that redeems the world? Is it that if you do that in your own life, the world is de facto redeemed?
It is that, but more, because if it's just that, then a Pelagian system would be true, that we just need a good, moral exemplar. It's something more,
a bit more than just merely good. I mean, it's superhuman, what's being asked for.
No, true, but it's something more metaphysical about it. It's a reworking of the way things are. If Jesus takes upon himself all the dysfunction of the world and swallows it up in the ever greater divine mercy, so it's Christ bearing all of our dysfunction, but transfiguring it in his great act of forgiveness and obedience to the Father. I think all of that coming together simultaneously is the sacrifice that's pleasing to the Father. In some ways, the word from the cross, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do, is the most important. Or play with this too, Jordan, that after the resurrection, so Jesus comes back precisely to those who had denied him and betrayed him and run from him in his moment of greatest need. And in almost any telling of a similar story, if that had all happened, and then the person who had died is back from the dead, and he appears to those who had abandoned him, you'd expect him to, wreak havoc on them, right? So Jesus shows his wounds, to be sure, because the wounds of Jesus are a sign of the world's dysfunction. If I'm ever tempted, when we were younger, the book, I'm Okay, You're Okay came out, right? And so we're always tempted to say, well, basically we're okay, just need a little fixing up around the edges. Whenever we're tempted to say that, it's the wounds of Jesus that say otherwise.
Because that's why I was insisting earlier that I don't, that it isn't merely misguided good that turns people towards the darkness. It's voluntary desire to produce the darkness as well. Anyways. I do take that very seriously. And it's an interesting idea, is that the ideal is wounded in proportion to the degree that everything has deteriorated away from the ideal. And that's almost by definition true, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. But it's just the very act of the will itself is structured in such a way it has to be seeking some kind of at least apparent good. But that's our earlier issue. So the wounds show the dysfunction of the world, which the Son of God took upon himself. But then the word of shalom, which is in all the resurrection accounts, that Jesus says, peace. So when Paul, for example, says, I'm certain that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor height nor depth, nor any other creature could ever separate us from the love of God. Well, how does he know that? Because we killed God. And he returned with a word of forgiveness. So that means it's like the divine goodness and forgiveness can trump any evil, even the evil of killing God. So we killed him, but yet he returned in forgiving love. I think that's the moment when Christianity is born, in the dual sense of, yes, we killed him, look at the wounds, but he says shalom to us nevertheless, so that I can't run away from him. I can try, that's what all of us sinners do. I can try, but ultimately the divine love is such that it's greater. That's why Paul can also say, where sin abounds, grace abounds the more. That's Christianity. So the greatest sin, we killed the Son of God. There's no greater sin than that. Where sin abounds, grace abounds the more. And see, all of that was made possible in a way by the great sacrifice of the cross, which is why it's a saving act.
Now that's I'm striving to understand. Okay, so I want to ask you a bunch of questions about that. So we talked a little bit before about the church bleeding its people. They're leaving. The young people are leaving. And my sense of that is it's because the church does not demand enough of its of young people.
Yeah, I think that's
doesn't
right.
demand enough, and by not demanding enough, it doesn't indicate its faith in their possibility. And so now in Orthodox Christianity, as I understand it, there seems to me to be more emphasis on the idea that it's each human's obligation to become like Christ. That's the goal. Well, that's that by definition, we could say, and we could speak psychologically about this as well, that means to become the ideal that's beyond rationality. Even that's what you're aiming at. That's what's hypothetically within your grasp. And it seems to me as well that that's what the Mass symbolizes, is that, and I'd be happy to have any objections to this, I would be happy to hear. The incorporation of the host is the embodiment, it's the incarnation of Christ within. That's what it's acting out. That's the idea. I mean, in some sense, it's the consumption of the saving element, but the saving element is actually a mode of being. And this isn't hit home. It's like, look what the church demands everything of you.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything. And the reason that people are leaving is because that adventure isn't being put before them.
Yes.
It's like, look, you can have your cars and your money and all of that, but that's nothing compared to the adventure that you could be going on.